Hello again. Are you ready for more? Clear your mind of everything you think you know. The myths and legends of ancient history will become clear as you entertain each idea that I present to you. These videos are wholly intended to be falsified. If you find my ideas troubling, you can always stop listening. If you would like further disambiguation, wait for more videos, or find the Thunderbolts Project on YouTube. Remember our context for this series. Planets form along a Birkeland current filament and are normally in a polar locked alignment with each other. This formation of planets is called a polar configuration. The polar configuration of planets in our ancient star system consisted of Earth, then Mars, Neptune, and Saturn. Think about how the physics would act in this situation. We know that the moon, as small as it is, creates the tides. I would like to attempt to prove to you that it is plausible for a living being to travel between planets without a spaceship. This process is wholly dependent on electromagnetic forces being exchanged between two planets. Remember that plasma physics is scalable, meaning, what takes place on one scale will have identical outcomes on another scale, be it micro or macro. Consider this experiment.
When I electrified water, there appeared a water breach hanging in the air. But to my surprise, when I was carrying out the same experiment with oil, it started pouring itself from one glass to another, through the air.
The water in these two cups are given a voltage. Notice how the water seems to jump from one cup to the other. Now, imagine that these are not cups, but two very close planets connected by a Birkeland current. Remember what I said about the names the ancients used to call the polar configuration in Chapter 1. The name I'd like to focus on now is, the Mountain of the Lord, or the World Mountain. In the Bible, Moses climbed up Mount Sinai to receive wisdom and law from God. When he returns, the people were seen worshipping a molten calf and Moses chastised them. In the Book of Mormon, Nephi travels up to an exceedingly high mountain, of which he had never seen. Then you have the mythic tales of Mount Olympus, Gibraltar, Shalem, and Caucasus. Mountains have been used as a mythic device in every culture. However, they aren't talking about snow-capped rock mountains like we would find on Earth today. These mountains were much more revered and sacred to the ancient peoples. Now, let's take a look into modern culture. Halo, the popular first-person sci-fi shooter, shows the player what it would look like on a ring world. This is no accident. Marvel movies that take source material from the ancient myths depict the capital of Asgard as a golden mountain. How about the Emerald City in The Wizard of Oz? My point is, the World Mountain is not to be confused by terrestrial rock mountains. Here's the hypothesis. The World Mountain is a combination of a Birkeland current mixed with the oceans of the planet. Due to the gravitational forces of planets close to each other, the water of Earth would have been pulled toward the north and appeared as if it were a dome or tent that stretched out into space. This is the mythic sea, the heavenly waters. The firmament as mentioned in Genesis talks about an expanse that separated the waters above from the waters below. The expanse was simply the space between planets. In those days, each planet was called a continent, or a corner of Earth. Earth was thought of as all four planets, not just the one we currently live on. Serpents, dragons, and rivers are all depictions of the electric Birkeland currents connecting the planets. Let's take a closer look at the Atlantic myth. This power came forth out of the Atlantic Ocean, for in those days the Atlantic was navigable, and there was an island situated in front of the straits which are by you called the Pillars of Heracles. The island was larger than Libya and Asia put together, and was the way to other islands. And from these you might pass to the whole of the opposite continent which surrounded the true ocean, for this sea which is within the Straits of Heracles is only a harbor, having a narrow entrance, but that other is a real sea, and the surrounding land may be most truly called a boundless continent. The Pillars of Heracles or Hercules are thought to be by some by the mountain we currently just so happen to call Gibraltar, but this is error caused by modern hubris. Notice Plato talks about the true ocean. Continents that lead to other continents? Larger than Libya and Asia? Asia covers 8.7% of the Earth's total surface, and yet, it's the largest continent by far on Earth. How did a continent even larger than Asia seemingly disappear? The answer is that the continent is not a continent, it is a planet. Remember that in ancient times planet had not been coined. In fact, it was Plato who coined the word. At the time it meant wandering stars. Plato translated the Atlantis myth from ancient Egyptian. I'll go into the Egyptian mythos later, as I'd like to remain focused on the premise of this video. The continent being a planet locked in polar alignment not only solves mysteries but also makes more logical sense in how the myth is worded. Can you think of any myths that use this celestial water bridge? Let me name a few. In Greek legend, Achilles was a hero of the Trojan War. He appeared to be invincible, and no man seemed to be able to defeat him. Legend tells us this was because his mother, the sea nymph Thetis, had tried to make him immortal after birth by dipping him in the river Styx. She only forgot to wet the heel by which she held him, which became his vulnerable spot. In Hindu mythology, Manu was a man that survived a great flood. One day as he washed his hands in the river, a fish swam into his hands and begged him to save his life. It was Matsya, an avatar, the bodily manifestation of a god. Manu put the fish in a jar, and as it grew bigger he subsequently placed Matsya in a tank, then a river, and finally, the ocean. Matsya warned him that soon a great flood would destroy all life. Manu built a boat and was towed onto a mountaintop by Matsya, thereby surviving the flood. In the Bible, Noah and his family are mentioned as the sole human survivors of the great flood. Noah was of the 10th generation after Adam, and all peoples of the world would descend from his son Shem, Ham, and Japheth. According to legend, Noah was told by God to build an ark to save himself and his family from the flood that would destroy all mankind. He brought 2 of every kind of animal with him in the ark, 1 male and 1 female. After 150 days the water receded, and the ark washed onto the mountains of Ararat. Avalon was a magical island that is said to have existed off the coast of Britain, and supposedly vanquished after some time. It was famous for its beautiful apples. Avalon is part of many stories and legends. It is said to be the island where Jesus and Joseph of Arimathea visited Britain, and consequently it is placed near Glastonbury and the church present there. In order to cross the river Styx and reach Hades, a dead person must pay a fee to the ferryman, Charon. If the correct fee is paid, Charon will take the dead across. If the dead cannot afford the fee, however, they will be forced to wander the banks of the river Styx as wraiths for eternity. This mythology is the same for the Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans. In Japanese folklore, when people die, they must cross the Sanza River to reach the afterlife. Datsuba sits on the edge of this river and tears off the clothes of the dead as they arrive. She then hangs them on a tree to measure the weight of their sins. Magpie Bridge, crossing the Silver River, aka the Milky Way, is one of the famous mythological locations of Chinese mythology. Depicted as a mural decorating the long corridor of the Summer Palace, in Beijing. Please note that all of these myths are depictions of the planets and their motions in the heavens. These were not real people. However, the idea of traveling across the cosmic river was a common idea, and that's what I'd like to point out here. There are other myths that may or may not mention a river or sea, but are still associated with water travel via ships. There are the legendary Norsemen who used boats to raid and pillage islands. Remember that island doesn't mean island. Then you have the Nephilim, the sons of God cast out of heaven to earth who taught humans how to war and gave them technology. This corroborates with some Native American myths about white men who came down from the north, down because the planet is up, and gave them technology as well. The Caucasus were a white people who were said to come from the mountain Caucasia. This is where we get the name Caucasian. We also have tartar. Tartar sauce and cream of tartar are stark white. Tooth tartar is yellow, but dealing with white teeth. Tartar is similar to the land of Egypt. Egypt simply meant the forbidden. The land of Egypt was the forbidden land. How did Noah find the land of Egypt if the entire planet was underwater? I'll give you a hint, it wasn't a single land, it was a whole new planet. I'm sure you've noticed a lot of flood archetypes in the myths I mentioned. There are many more. I will cover the flood in a later chapter, but for now, the flood occurred as a result of the planetary polar configuration falling away due to the Saturnian system colliding with the solar system. If my theory on Atlantis is correct, then I may propose another hypothesis. These ancient names for lands that predate modernity may be derived from the names the groups called themselves. Another way to think about this is these names are names of the planets. Libya, Tartar, Caucasus, Ameri, and more. Our modern names do not tell the whole story. The modern lands' names may simply be a way the refugees from the cosmic catastrophe claimed their territory, and these names survived until present day. History has been contorted to fit our modern lens. Meanings of old words have been lost and replaced, hijacking our thought process. People have began using these myths to convince themselves of fantastic ideas that simply have no basis in reality. Most modern religions prize untruthful testimony for the sake of emotionalism. Superstition rules the paradigms in most people's headspace. I want to correct this through disambiguation of myths in history. In conclusion, given the mountains of evidence in the form of myths and handed-down stories, it is plausible that in ancient times people could travel from one planet to another, and this was seen as a common enough idea for it to be addressed in nearly every mythology. Not only that, but a person could travel to all 4 of the planets that made up Earth. Planets were up and down, north and south. Nearly every single myth has beings from another land, realm, continent, etc., traveling to the point of the myth's origin and performing mighty feats. Some of this is the archetypification and personification of planetary motions, and other myths depict catastrophe necessitating immediate emergency disembarkation to another world. I'll stop here for now. Look forward to more videos for further mythological disambiguation. I hope to cover each specific mythic archetype and address modern Christianity in the next one, but you will have to wait and see.